Today, I'll tell you whether now, in the second half of 2023, it's a good time or not to buy a property in Denmark. If you're thinking about buying a house or buying an apartment, this video will help you make a better and more informed decision. It's a whole new world. Here in Denmark, in the last year alone, we have seen interest rates go up from 1% to between 5 and 6%. We have gone through an unprecedented inflation and energy crisis, and all the while, massive new housing taxes are expected to kick in 2024 for apartments in the big cities. In this context, my take is that if you plan to buy a place for the medium and long term, so we're talking about 5 years plus, go ahead. Especially if it's an apartment, so you get to buy something and move in this year, hence skipping these new taxes. More on that later in the video. Second, if you're paying already a lot in rent, so you can basically stomach these higher interest rates. But if you're looking into the short term, so you plan to live in Denmark or buy a house for the next just 1, 2, or maybe even 3 years, and you have no long-term plans, or you just want to buy for the sake of thinking that the prices will go up and then you don't pay any taxes on the gain, I tell you, not the best time to do that now. In the rest of the video, I'll explain my whole thinking in more detail. First, let's do a market update. Prices for property in Denmark are down 7% in the past 12 months. And again, that's for the country as a whole. If you take down the capital region, the prices are down 10%. And if you go specifically to apartments in the capital region, they're down by 14%. Again, this is not a surprise, as in the past year we have seen like massive housing increases in like prices because of COVID. We had big raises in interest rates, and basically all that helped dampen the demand now. A lot of people that wanted to buy already bought, and then the people that wanted to buy still, they just backed off a little bit because of the higher interest, which is pretty crazy. But now that demand is picking up again, you can see that there's a lot more interest into real estate now than it was just a few months back. And we can see that the prices are stabilizing and even going up a little bit again. And we can see that the demand is slowly coming back. And I can give an anecdotal evidence for this instead of just statistics. And that is that if you just look at my building behind me, and we had 6, 7, 8 apartments maybe even for sale on the last like 6 months, a year almost. A lot of them took really long time to get sold, but then all within the last month, and also within like a specific period, like 3 weeks, they all got sold one after the other. And I was like, whoa, we went from a lot of to be sold to sold in just like boom. And that is an interesting data point. So what is driving this? In a way, I see, and many experts also agree, that there are 2 main factors playing here. The first one is that there were a lot of people that wanted to buy already last year, but backed off because of the higher interests. And now that it appears that the interest rates are going to be high for a long time anyway, or at least for the coming years, people said like, okay, if it makes financial sense, we really want to buy it, let's go for it now. Second, specifically for apartments, the new property taxes are going to be kicking into effect next year. And I'm going to explain that in a minute, but what you need to know already is that if you buy a flat now, before the new law kicks in the first day of next year, you'll pay less in taxes than if you buy after the law kicks in effect. And you'll do that for as long as you live in the house. So if you're looking to buy a place for the long term, you might be thinking, okay, maybe it's better to buy a place now at higher prices and get lower taxes, because over the long time you will save money. In all cases, most analysts from the Danish media and so on, they expect that the jump in demand that you see now for apartments and houses is temporary, and they expect the prices will fall again next year when these new taxes kick into effect. Now let's look into the housing fundamentals. In all cases, I say buy for the long term, and that's because the fundamentals of Denmark, of buying property in Denmark, remain strong. The first one is that it is cheap in Denmark to buy a house, relatively speaking, to other similar type of European cities. So if you look at Oslo or Stockholm or Helsinki, it's more expensive to buy there than it is to buy in Copenhagen. And at the same time, France and Switzerland, and even other places like Amsterdam, have a lot higher real estate values than you still see here in Denmark, at least at like adjusted meter square price. Some people like to argue that the Danish numbers are artificially low because we include the corridors, a lot of crazy things like that. Just know that even when you include all these things, Denmark is still not a top 10 country in terms of real estate cost, despite being like per capita and in many different metrics a top tier economy. And the top tier economy is something I want to touch on next, which is the strong economy in Denmark and the long-term prospects, which are very good and very strong, help you think that, okay, there's going to be more like tailwinds for the real estate market over the next decade even. So Denmark has weathered COVID relatively well. The government and household finances are relatively solid, again, in comparison to other countries in Europe. There's a booming job market, there's job growth, and also crucially, I see it especially now, there's a lot of expats moving into the country as well. And many of them are well paid, and when they come in here, they want to buy a house as well, and that fuels demand. I mean, these are people that have money and want to buy a place as well. And this is very important because there's a high correlation between economic strength and asset prices such as real estate. The third point is demand and supply imbalance. It is crazy expensive to rent a place in Denmark. It still is now, and it's gonna get even worse, I would think. I expect that the homeowners will pass on the higher cost of taxes, the higher cost of interest rates to their tenants sooner or later. I know that the Danish government has passed on some rules to cap rent increases and this and that, but give it enough time, these things will adjust, and it's gonna be, again, much more expensive to rent than it is at the moment. It's just a matter of time, or it's gonna be given, because fundamentals, nobody would rent a place out if they lose money to rent the place. Often in Denmark, you still see now a better deal by owning a place versus renting, at least from a cash flow perspective. That's even why I bought myself. I paid less now here than I used to pay on my rent, and I even had a good rent, people say. Depending on what is your rent now and what type of loans you'll get access to, again, it may make more sense to buy. And maybe that's a lot of people that are in a similar situation. Hence, it's better to just think that the economy is strong and these things happen, and then that this would help prices up. So in conclusion, if I could buy my dream apartment now, if I see it for sale now and the price is reasonable, I would buy it. But I would just look into one critical thing. I would focus a stronger negotiation, in the sense that even if the market is heating up a little bit, I would still don't take the prices that you see advertised at face value and negotiate hard. Maybe sometimes you can get 10% down, maybe 15% down. It will depend on the case, but it's very important and worth to, just push on this. Don't be shy about it. And luckily for you, I made a free course on how to buy a house in Denmark, and you can find the link here in the video description. If you want a taster, you can also watch this video where I go through my top negotiation tips.